This is an AZCourtHelp legal talk filmed in May 2023.
My name is Jennifer Kolodinsky, and I am a family and community mediator. Ben?
Oh, and hi, I'm Ben Deguire, and I'm a family law attorney in Flagstaff.
And so the things we're going to talk about as we go through this will be when should you plan? The timing can be very important and can help reduce conflict. We're going to talk about what kinds of things you should think about. There are a few examples mentioned there: your work, your co-parents' work, the day-to-day schedule, your kids' interests. We'll talk about the kind of rather ask you to consider what kind of co-parenting relationship you share with the other co-parent, because that kind of relationship will influence how you set about scheduling and going through your summer plans in a way that will be the least conflictual, not only for yourself, but more importantly for your children, because we do know from the research that conflict hurts children. So anything you can do, whether it's summer planning or exchanges, anything that you can do with reduced or eliminated conflict will help them in the short and long term. And then how can your kids have a memorable summer? So you can do this. We know you can set yourself up, but sometimes the question is, well, how can I do this thing I want to do, which is to have a successful summer in this case, or a successful co-parenting relationship? And there are tried and true ways to have a co-parenting relationship and experience that's going to be better for everybody. One of those things is to read your parenting time plan. It's a good document for you to always be familiar with. It's easy to think, well, I have it all up here, but to review that plan can be very helpful for any big event and time in the calendar, but certainly going into summer.
And the important thing too is also to remember to make sure you have your most current plan, especially if you've had modifications since the original plan was entered. If there's been any revisions regarding any of the summer parenting time or any of the payments for costs of camps, etc., this is the time to make sure that you're looking at the current plan and not an old one, because oftentimes I see parties get mixed up between plans, and that creates a lot of confusion, which creates animosity and unnecessary conflict. So just make sure that you're working on the most current plan.
Make note of the details. So you may have a quick look at your parenting time plan and say, well, okay, we're going to share the summer, or we're each going to get a couple of weeks, something like that. But dive down into the details. Does one of you have first dibs, as I sometimes call it, where you know that in an even year, one of you is going to have the first chance, or in an odd year, one of you will have the first chance to claim some time? People make decisions while they're crafting their parenting time plans with mediators, attorneys, sometimes on their own, in which they set up a date that they will have the plan formulated and confirmed by a certain date. That's the kind of detail you need to know. If you have a no later than date, like no later than May 15th or June 1st, that's something you want to know.
And Jennifer, to add to that, in parenting plans now that I create, we do like to put deadlines for notifications of summer travel or summer vacations with the children, so that people aren't having last minute conflicts as to who's going to have the children and for how long, etc. So normally, at least on the year anniversary of the plan, you should look at it, because you can expect that there may be some need for changes. But looking at those details as far as when you need to provide notification to the other parent, or the itinerary for the travel, if it's for a vacation, if it's for summer camp, what decisions, the deadline decisions, but you have to make decisions for the camp that the children are going to attend, how that's going to be paid. So it's very important for those little details, like Jennifer said, to make note of them, because they're going to come up, and when that discussion comes up, it's easier to know who needs to do what at what time.
The other detail that I just want to touch on briefly is the potential detail, if you will, of following your regular schedule. Some parents decide they don't want to make any changes for the summer simply because their work schedules do not allow for time off and vacations, even though their school-aged children may be off. So that's something else to just keep an eye on. Do you have specific plans for extended time with your children? Or is it business as usual, the way you share children during the school year? That too is the kind of thing to keep an eye on, so you can think about how you're going to plan for your own care of your children if you have them in the regular way to which everybody is accustomed. Next up is schedule a call. And you'll note that some of these words are deliberately capitalized as your action steps. Read, note, and schedule. A call with the other parent to talk about parenting time over the summer can go a long way. And so, however you wish to do that, it makes sense to do it. Maybe you have the kind of co-parenting relationship where you can get together, maybe for a lemonade to usher in the season, but you might have the kind of co-parenting relationship where a phone call is going to be better because you know the nature of the conflict between the two of you and whether or not you're going to do best by phone, in person, and maybe even using some of the scheduling apps that you might be familiar with, such as Our Family Wizard just popped into my head. But don't delay, even if it feels hard, and even if you feel a little avoidance because it's hard, I would suggest to you that it's only going to get harder if you wait longer.
Right, and scheduling the call, it's important to pay attention to how that's supposed to take place. Oftentimes in the parenting plan, again, there'll be a date and also the means, how it's going to be held, whether it's going to be done by phone call, you're going to have an in-person meeting, and that's also if that's even allowed. Some orders require that the parents communicate by phone only, by email, by programs, as Jennifer said, like Our Family Wizard, and don't require the parties to meet in person. So again, adding to what Jennifer said, it's important to take a look at the language of how the scheduling meeting is supposed to happen, and then reach out to the other parent to make sure that happens, whether it be by phone call, email, etc.
And stay focused on the topic of summer. And that word focused is obviously one of those capitalized words. It can be very easy to find yourself down a rabbit hole talking about something else. We really encourage you, and I know I speak for both Ben and I from both of our perspectives, because part of the series with Ben and I is to try and give you a mediator perspective as well as that of an attorney. But we know that in different ways, if you set up schedule a call, or you get together, whatever, and you start veering away from the topic that you identified was the topic of the meeting, things can go south. And this is a tip for you to take into any meeting with your co-parent. Anytime you want to talk to something, one of the ways you set yourself up for success is to say, can we talk about the kid's upcoming dentist appointment? Can we talk about summer? Whatever it is, stick with it.
And speaking of sticking with it, make sure that you stick with the language of the agreement. Unless the two of you agree to change it, and that's fine, you can certainly do that. I would encourage you strongly, actually suggest you both put it in writing. It can be by email or text message, but it's important to at least have something that can be shown to the court in the event that there is a dispute as to what the modification was. But staying focused on the topic also means staying focused on the plan and what is to happen. A lot of times I see parents trying to use those discussions to negotiate new terms for summer or for the parenting plan after school. And it's really not the time to do that unless that's something that the two of you had been discussing, because then things go sideways, like Jennifer was saying, you're not going to accomplish anything regarding the summer parenting time. And more often than not, you're going to end up in court, and the judge will tell you the same thing, that staying focused on the topic would have prevented everybody from being in court, and a lot of emotional and financial unnecessary liability. So stay focused on the topic. It's not a time for renegotiations. It's a time to really get into motion the plan that the two of you had for the summer activities of the children.
And the last one is, the word highlighted is now. The time to plan is right now. Think about April 1st, on or around April 1st, to try and at least begin the discussion for summer planning. Know your other co-parent as you sit down to talk about this from your time orientation. As I said before, I don't think there's anything to be lost and much to be gained if you at least begin the process now.
Yeah, I mean, starting the process now is, or at least by April 1st, when we're talking about the summer, is important because a lot of the courts are really busy during the summer with a lot of similar cases, similar disputes if parents aren't able to resolve it. And then there's also vacations that the courts have, and judges and the people that work in the court system, the attorneys. So it's going to be difficult to wait till the last minute if you haven't made plans for your summer vacation or whatever it is that you want to get moving on. It's important to start working on that now, because if there's going to be a dispute or if there's some sort of issue that needs to be resolved, you're going to want to get in front of the judge sooner than later. And so filing an action before the summer actually starts to address those problems is usually best, because if you wait, summer will be passing you before you even get to the hearing.
Now we're going to spend a little bit of time on the do's and don'ts. Do discuss summer plans as soon as possible. We already touched on that, obviously, just now. There's one thing I wanted to add, because Ben mentioned that not only the judges, but there's also court personnel and associated court personnel that are on vacation as well, like mediators and family law attorneys. Do listen to your kids' wishes for summer and share those with the other parent. This is a big one, and we're going to talk a little bit more about this because there's a don't associated with this too. There's a really fine line between hearing what your children have to say and letting them run the show. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes. But hearing from your children and what they envision as a meaningful and fun summer is really important. And the thing that you can do to help your child, it's not about helping the other parent, it's about helping your child, is to share those wishes with the other parent. Don't make them guess. And perhaps your child during a season, this is very common, whether you're married, divorced, or separated, sometimes children will gravitate toward one parent over or more than another for some period of time, and then the pendulum swings back to the other parent. But don't make it hard on your child. Make it easy on your child by sharing their wishes with the other parent.
Right, and I hear it from the judges a lot that this is the children's time to have their happiness, their relaxation. They're not in school. They don't have their stresses. They're not hopefully hearing their parents go through things, and if they are, that's got to be stressful for them. So this is really a time for the vacation to be centered around what's fun for the kids, not fun for the parents and just bringing the kids along. So, and then when sharing the plans or those wishes with the other parent, it's important because sometimes the children want to do more than one thing. And if, the parents do the same thing, that is not sometimes unnecessary and it's not as fun. But also because the children, when they see that you're communicating with the other parent, for that, they feel important. And then, of course, they see their parents working together, which is equally important. And that makes for a better summer vacation, and also, works better for the parents and future planning.
So pardon me, I said it was a don't, but it is a do. Do remember that you and the co-parent are in charge, not the children. And that's that delicate balance I spoke of just a few moments ago. It's so important to listen to our children, but also to give them the comfort and safety and containment of knowing that you and the other parent are going to make the decisions. If you allow them to make the decisions, it's too much for the child to bear. That burden is too heavy to carry. We won't get into it now, but there's so many issues of loyalty and concerns and wanting to please both of their parents because they love you, no matter how difficult it's been. Children love their parents. And so just a reminder, you guys are in charge, you and the other parent, not your children, even though you want to hear from them and let them know they are important.
And the reason why it's important to communicate with each other with this point is because I see a lot of times when I see the disputes in the summers, oftentimes with the older kids, it has to do with that very issue, which is what they want to do. And you know, kids can be crafty, and they will use that to their advantage to get something from the other parent. And because if the parents aren't communicating what the wishes are that the children have, along with what their plans are, then they don't know. And then the child just uses that against the other parent to their advantage. And it creates a lot of animosity because the parents don't see it that way. Oftentimes they think it's the other parent who is leading the charge. And it creates a lot of confusion and heartache with the family. So it is important to communicate with each other, especially like we just said before, with the children's wishes as to what they want to do, but also remember that the two of you are in charge. You have to remember that the two of you make the decision for the children, and so they can't use that ability to get their own way by using the two of you against each other.
Thank you. Do be aware that what many children want more than anything is to have fun and not deal with the conflict and the tension. They will undoubtedly give you a laundry list of what they'd really enjoy doing. And I'm sure that can run the gamut from go to the beach, go swimming, go to Disneyland, go to the movies, play with friends, on and on and on. But the most important thing for most kids is going to be that they are at peace, they feel safe, they feel loved, and they are not in the middle of interparental conflict and tension. We really can't say that enough. Keeping them out of the middle is hugely important, and children want to be free of it, no matter what they may say to the contrary, especially with some older kids who might give the impression they want to know the burden is too much and it doesn't do them any good. So just keep that in mind. They don't want to be involved with your conflict. If you have some with the other parent, they just really want to focus on fun.
And let's throw in the example of there are going to be cases when there is conflict, when the parents just don't get along. And usually what happens in those cases is that the children won't tell you anything about what they want to do because they're afraid to hurt the other parent, or they're let down the other parent. And so don't fall for children that if your child doesn't tell you they want to do anything, or they just want to stay home, or they don't, there's nothing exciting to do. A lot of times it just may be that they don't feel comfortable telling you because they don't want the other parent to feel bad. So just keep that in mind, and make sure that even if they don't tell you, that you pay attention to what they do like, so that there is something that you can plan fun for them, and they will appreciate that.
Do send a few fun photos to the other parent. This is such an easy thing to do. And depending on the co-parenting relationship you share, it's one of those things that's easily withheld because you have undoubtedly really strong feelings about how difficult it may be to co-parent with the other parent. But if you can follow the golden rule, that will go such a long way. And you will probably enjoy seeing photos of your child or children having fun with the other parent. So be a leader in that regard and send them a few photos. You don't have to account for every moment of every day. That's not your job. It's not required, and it's not necessary. But a few photos here and there is such an act of goodwill towards your co-parent and the co-parenting relationship, and so easy to do.
You also get the advantage of having photos of your child that you wouldn't have otherwise had, because you and the other parent have the ability to co-parent and share those memories without any hard feelings or jealousy. So it's really a good thing if you have the ability to share in that relationship, to share photos, or if the children are old enough and have their own phones, encourage them to do it. Hey, let's take a photo and in your phone and send it to your mom or send it to your dad. That also is really encouraging that kind of communication between the parent and good relationships. But with the photos, just make sure that the photo just includes the child. I see a lot of times photos that will include significant others, maybe later on in the relationship after, the parties have separated in a divorce, that might work. But if it's early on after the separation or divorce, it's not really doesn't go well to send photos of your child with the significant other to the parent, or you in there as well, because that could be construed as a way of just kind of rubbing it in. And I see that oftentimes too. And that's not really the purpose of the photos. The purpose is to share a memory of your joint child, the child you have in common, with the other parent, freely, to just as a moment of happiness, and not as a way to hurt or upset the other parent.
This next one's really important, and it's to remember that day-to-day decisions are made by the parent who has the parenting time. I put a couple of examples: lots of ice cream, staying up late, that's out of your control. Summer living can be much freer for children, particularly school-age children, of course, because summer is such a distinct time during the year. If you're watching and you're parenting preschool age children, these are things to tuck away, possibly. Or if your children are involved with preschool calendars or childcare calendars that allow for time off, then these can apply to you. But the day-to-day decision-making that each of you have is really important to respect, even if you don't like it. And we know as a mediator and an attorney that you may not. You may not like that your child gets ice cream 7 nights a week, or that all summer long they get to stay up till 11 when you would rather put them to bed at 8. But it's out of your control. And it is one of the most difficult parts of separation and divorce, because you lose the influence over the parent that you once had when you were in a loving relationship with one another, because those day-to-day decisions and their ability to make them is not going to change.
One of the biggest problems in the summer is that it's the schedule of the child is not necessarily the same as the school year, and that's understandable. But maybe one parent wants to stick to the routine and the other parent says, I don't want to. In my case, it's often surprising to my clients when I ask them on this scenario, well, what did you guys used to do when you were together? Did you ever let the kids stay up late? Sure we did. Did you ever let them have ice cream or something before dinner, or something that you wouldn't normally do? Of course we did. And so I say, well, what's the difference in doing it now? Just because it's with the other parent and you're not there doesn't make it worse. It just means that they're sharing that same activity with that parent, and it doesn't mean you can't do the same as well. And again, to be clear on the activities, and what we mean by day-to-day are things like, where are they going to go, if they're going to have some fun, if they have ice cream, if they're going to go to the movies. But there are limitations. I mean, medications, deciding on whether or not your child takes their medication that day, or whether they go to an important appointment or counseling sessions. Those are not the types of activities that we're talking about. We're talking about the things where a parent and a child are having fun and having free activities that aren't requirements for the child's health, safety, and welfare. But anything other than that is up to the child and the parent, and the courts will encourage that because it's their free time and their summertime.
Don't wait until the last minute to reach out to the other parent. This is, I believe, the 3rd time you've heard us say it, but because it is that important, the sooner you reach out, the better things will go, not only for your children, but for you. We do truly understand and sympathize with the fact that your life is not exclusively about your children. Many of us, and probably those of you watching, it's mostly about your children, because that's what we parents do. We set aside so much of our desires to parent well and to be there for our child. But for your sake, to take care of yourself, plan ahead, plan early, and be thorough. Don't schedule vacation dates will breed conflict. When I'm working with people in mediation, we talk about summertime and holiday time in addition to regular day-to-day time. And for example, we have a holiday that occurs over the summer. That's the 4th of July. But there may be other things to take into consideration. There may be birthdays, there may be cultural traditions or special days culturally that have an impact upon your family. You know what they are already, we encourage you to not purposefully schedule vacation dates that will breed conflict.
Right, and so normally in the parenting plans, you'll see that some language that reminds the parents that holidays and summer vacation parenting time, et cetera, take precedence over regular parenting time. And so for that reason, the holidays are oftentimes and vacation times are often specifically set out in the parenting plan so that there's no confusion. But it's really important to remember that just because it's not in the plan doesn't mean you shouldn't work with the other parent to avoid conflict. And what I see every summer, at least once, is there's a wedding that a family member or parent has that they want the children to attend. It's very important. The other parent knows about it. It's not in the parenting plan, obviously, because that wasn't known at the time. But it's now, like Jennifer said, known by the other parent because they knew about it. But simply to create conflict, they might schedule a vacation knowing that information and then use the excuse that now they can't change their plans. And this just creates so much nasty conflict between parents. And when that happens, the children are the ones who suffer emotionally for it. And then that's not to mention the back and forth that goes in the courtroom between the parents. This is also why it would be important to, if you have an important activity like a family reunion or a wedding, something that's coming up that you would like your children to attend, and maybe it is conflicting with the other parents' parenting time, that notify them as early as you can, because that also shows that you're trying to work with them, and because it's going to happen again. The favor will be returned. I promise you, I see it every time, and there will be a wedding or a reunion or a funeral or an important event that the other parent wants to go to. And this is how you start good relations with negotiations on parenting plans and modifications, and avoid having to bring judges into it who don't want to have to make these decisions for your kids.
Don't expect the other parent to agree just because you asked. They don't have an obligation, but do be a model of compromise and flexibility. I know of a very simple quote: no deposit, no return. But if you make those deposits, you'll get return. But what I mean by deposits is be the model, be the one who says yes, because that kind of thing will be remembered. And then ideally, when it's your turn, that parent will remember they said yes, I'll say yes too. And it's those actions, bit by bit by bit, that build upon each other to hopefully bring about a greater and more supportive co-parenting relationship. But it is important to remember that you can ask, but that does not obligate the parent to agree. The best you can do is ask, and then be a model when you are asked.
And if the other side doesn't agree, it's not a reason to retaliate, whether that be in text, whether that be in another activity. And it certainly does not mean that you tell the children. I see that a lot as well, where they say, well, we were supposed to go here, but your mom said no. And then the children, they harbor resentment against mom because they thought they were going to Disneyland, but instead they have to go to a family reunion for family they don't know. And so it's really hard for them to see the perspective of as to why they're not going. And so then they blame mom blames dad, and it gets nasty. So like Jennifer said, be the model of compromise, but flexibility does go a long way in keeping everybody happy, free from conflict, but also having the ability to share important times and memories with the children.
So let's talk about a couple of issues that you're going to face. And one of them would be the issue of day-to-day schedules. Again, if you have school-age children or preschool-age children, but those preschool-age children are involved in a preschool or a childcare center that may take the summer off, then your children's day-to-day is going to look very different than during the school year. As we all know that, and so many of us are working with children, And so your day-to-day is very likely to remain consistent unless, of course, you happen to be an employee of a school or a childcare facility or something like that. So you are still working, even though your children now have in the neighborhood of about 9 weeks off. So you and the other parent should be aware of the day-to-day. It can be so helpful to know what your co-parents' work schedule is, and to make that a part of your summer discussion that we referred to earlier when you schedule that summer phone call or communication, because your kids' schedules are now a wide open book, even though your own schedule is likely to remain very much the same. Your co-parenting communication relationship is another thing that we believe warrants communication, because if you have a really easy co-parenting relationship, then the day-to-day schedules and the changes that might come about as a result of those day-to-day schedules are much easier to handle, because that communication relationship, if it is good, is going to allow you to do the quick text. I have to stay at work late. A meeting came up. The kids are getting out of summer camp early. The kinds of real pragmatic things that we face while parenting our children. If your co-parenting relationship is strained and the communication is more difficult, that is going to very likely impact you more during the summer when the children are out of school. And so taking an honest look at and taking stock of your co-parenting communication relationship is always important from my perspective, but it's extremely important as you go into the time of summer, because it can be looser in terms of the kids' schedules and the kinds of issues you're going to talk about, which is if you work, for example, and you may feel that your 10 and 11-year-old can stay home for the whole day without childcare, and the other parent may feel, no, they're too young to do that. Those are the kinds of things that will come up. And so taking an honest look at your co-parenting relationship can be helpful. And if you can, talk about it and use this as your inspiration, motivation to work on it.
That the example that Jennifer gave about babysitting is a perfect example of the parents really needing to be able to communicate on a point that's very important. And again, this is where I ask my clients or remind them to kind of separate themselves from the parent and the spouse, because during the marriage, it may be something that they would have allowed to go out on a date night, to allow their 13-year-old to babysit their younger sibling or siblings. But now that they're divorced and one spouse wants to go out on a date with their significant other, that 13-year-old is not old enough to babysit the children. So I just remember that it's a perspective that you want to take as the parent, and set aside the old relationship you have with the spouse, because the two of you have to look at what's best for the children and make that joint determination as to whether your child is old enough or mature enough to be a babysitter. And that's just the beginning. It gets into driving and other things. But this is why communication is really important, like Jennifer said, because the parents need to be able to make those decisions for the child or the children without any back and forth conflict that's just going to make more problems for them in the summer.
And one thing I'd like to add to bring these 2 points together is the following, and that is the nature of your co-parenting communication relationship as it relates to day-to-day schedules. Because the other thing that can come up during summer parenting time is that one of you does have greater flexibility with your work. And as a result of that, you can have more parenting time, and at times the other parent can have more parenting time in a really organic way. Doesn't necessarily have to be contrived. It can be the easy conversation, but again, it can be as easy as, hey, during the summer when I work from this time to this time, would you like more parenting time? That's the kind of thing that you can do to model compromise and flexibility and overall goodwill. So I just wanted to make that note as part of what you will face during summer parenting time. Put your money where your mouth is. Some of you, on the heels of that conversation of concerns about whether your child will be home alone with the other parent, and you're not comfortable with that, If it means that much to you, consider making a change, making an offer. A lot of times, once the relationship between the two parents in the marriage or partnership has dissolved, perhaps the other parent shares the value that they'd rather the children aren't at home all day on their own, even if they're capable of it. It just may not be as stimulating and engaging for them, but they simply don't have the budget to fund camps. Well, maybe one of the things you can do, because again, as we've stated before, not only today, but in prior presentations, it's not about the other parent, it's about your child. And one of the things you can do is pay for camp, pay for childcare, or maybe you're going to offer to pay more than 50% because it's just the way to resolve the issue of the value that you hold dear.
Paying for the camp more often than not is cheaper than paying for attorney's fees to fight the issue. And like Jennifer said, if it's something that's important to you, if the other side, the other parent can't do it, it's not something to go take them to court and enforce or try to make happen, because the courts also recognize, like Jennifer said, not every parent has the ability to do that. So this is where, if there isn't already language in the parenting plan or the decree that requires who's going to pay for what as far as child care camps, this is the opportunity to really work together. And if the other parent, say, likes your idea, but they can't afford to pay for it, then if you can do it, make the offer so that you can have that opportunity for the child that you really think is important. But at the same time, you're working with the other parent, and then the other parent knows too that they can rely on you to help when necessary. And again, I see it reciprocated all the time between parents. So I always encourage parents to work together like that.
What do you have to share with the other parent regarding travel? And there's actually a statute about this, is my understanding, and that's certainly how I've always thought of it. And that is that you need to share where you're going, how you're going to get there, and how you can be reached while you are there. In our world now of cell phones, it can be very easy. I find myself doing this sometimes, thinking, well, I don't even need to know where you're going because I can always call you on your cell phone. But the reality is, cell phones don't always work all of the time. So the way you can do that is very easily and quickly. I'm going to my mom's house. We'll be in Minnesota, and you already have the home number, my mom's cell and my cell, and that's how you can reach us while you're there. I made that up, but that's the idea of an example.
Whether you have your a personalized parenting plan that you had created, or it's one that was created through the courts, there's going to be language regarding notification for out-of-state travel. And there's no requirement for, and this is after the proceeding, divorce or custody proceeding. There is no requirement for receiving consent from the other parent to leave the state unless there's language in the parenting plan that requires them to do so. And some parenting plans will, but more often than not, the language in the plans will be something such as the parents have to provide the other parent with notification of their intent to travel outside of the state with the minor child. They provide that parent with a travel itinerary, typically, which simply is just the dates of the travel, how they're going to be getting there, whether it's by plane or if they're going by train or et cetera, and then where they'll be staying. So that way, in case of an emergency, the parent, the non-traveling parent, will know how to reach the other parent if they have to go find them or have somebody locate them. But that's typically all that's necessary. You don't have to get into specifics about where you're going to be going every single day. But again, like I mentioned earlier in the discussion, if there's something that is important, like a skydiving, if you're taking them skydiving, or one I see too, four-wheeling a lot, on four-wheelers, those kinds of things can be dangerous. So those things may require consent, and if there are forms you would need to ask. And those things you can't get around if both parents require signatures. And I've seen parents try to sign those, but for the other parents, so don't do that. But getting back to my point is, you don't have to share if it's just going to Disneyland today and tomorrow we're going to be at Legoland and then SeaWorld. that's something you don't have to share. Those are not important things for the other parent, and it's really a privacy issue too, because that's your free time with your children.
We wanted to bring up staycations as well. Staycations are, that word didn't exist probably more than 5 or 10 years ago, but we have talked as a society more and more about the idea of a staycation. You've taken time off from work and you're going to plan some fun activities probably, but they're going to be local. And staycations, people have different opinions about staycations. Ben's going to talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I'm also noticing a lot of the judges are not really liking those as well. The idea behind a vacation is that the parties and the children will have time where they can leave their home and do some other activity that they don't normally do. And that could include, I get this asked all the time, camping. Camping is totally fine. Or going, somewhere that's, even if it's within the state, it's certainly fine. It doesn't have to be elaborate. It doesn't have to be expensive. Visiting family is also could be considered a vacation time. If you go, say, to California and you visit family over there for a reunion, like I mentioned, or that's stuff that is not considered a staycation, and that's certainly acceptable. What the courts will say, at least what I'm starting to recognize recently, is that they don't want the parent staying home with the children. Even if they're not working, they just don't want them sitting there and kids playing video games all day and the parent in their room watching Dr. Phil or something like that. They want the parents and the children interacting and having some kind of fun activity. So as long as it's not just the parents staying home with the children, vacations are what courts want. And what they're saying, and I had just had recently a case where the judge said that if the parent is not going to utilize an actual vacation and just stay home, that they're not allowed to exercise their vacation time. So if they're not going to do something for vacation, then they can't request that time from the other parent. Because it's really not doing anything for the children as by way of vacation. And that's just something that I'm recognizing courts are really finding is important for the children now.
We know that not everybody can take a vacation. But one of the things I talk about mediation when we get to this section, because as Ben mentioned earlier, summer and holiday time, these specific plans can take priority above your regular day-to-day schedule. If you are going to stay, and perhaps you are going to do some fun things, you're going to camp for a night or two, but keep this in mind. Is there a reason for your child not to see the other parent if you're not going anywhere? And the answer is probably not. So just be mindful of that. If you're going to stay in town, and maybe it's your regular parenting time, don't withhold your child from seeing their other parent, because again, it's about your child's relationship with their parent, not your relationship with the co-parent. School changes for next year. These can come up, and it's a good time to start thinking about them and talking about them, because there can be a lot of tension. There may be something as simple as your child is going to go from, say, elementary school to middle school, and you're both on the same page, and that's great. You know the school your child's going to go to, maybe one of the neat programs that are offered within different school systems. But even with that, there can be transitions. The day's schedule can be different. The bell schedule at the school can be different. You may need to tweak your transportation or your exchange plans. You may need to have a look at your own work schedule. But you also may find yourself in a position where you don't agree on what next academic year looks like for your child. Don't wait until August 1st to start talking about it, because school can start anywhere from, a week to 2 weeks at that point. Start talking about that now.
Yeah, the judges don't want to receive a request for a decision like this in July. If this is something that's going to become an issue between you and the other parent, start talking about it now, because now's the time that the two of you can get into mediation. If there's a dispute, and then if that fails, at least you can try to get into the judge before school starts. Waiting to the midsummer, I never see that happen, because the courts are extremely busy right now. So Don't wait.
The final thought is for us to talk about, for you to think about you as the model for conflict resolution to your child, because you are. And you parents are the first teacher of your child. And that can mean the ABCs and the 1, 2, 3s, but it can also mean the lifelong skill of conflict resolution. To be alive means we will have conflict. So you are the first and most important model of how to resolve conflict. You'll have it, they'll have it, but you have incredible opportunities in your co-parenting relationship to model how life can go on, how hope can be restored, and how you can work through and resolve the conflict that all of us inevitably face.
I mean, I'll tell clients, don't show your children how to throw tantrums. That's really what happens oftentimes if parties can't work together. And being that kind of model is not, I'm sure none of us want our children to have that kind of model from anyone else. And so reminding ourselves that throwing a tantrum because the other parent is not working with me and giving me what I want is not going to be a good example for your child as to how to act in the future, and whether it be at school or in future relationships when they get older. So like Jennifer said, it's be a great model for your child, and how the two of you interact in resolving any disputes that might come up regarding the summer is going to go a long way towards your child's development.
Party is over. As summer comes to an end, don't interrogate your child about their experience. Don't make negative comments about their summer experience with the other parent. Listen to the summer memories, enjoy the photos, enjoy the souvenirs, enjoy the memory. And as summer ends, be sure that you work with them to ensure the successful transition back to school. Depending on your child, they may have a lot of feelings about a return to school, and we encourage you to work together to smooth out any bumpy places.
Your child's happiness is most important. They're happy with you, they're happy with the other parent. Just do your best not to make them feel bad about that, because that is what's most important, is that they feel loved and secure.
Yes.
By both parents.
Yes. And if you're watching, we know that you are interested in and willing to provide your child a really joyful experience, even though you have faced some challenges by being divorced or separated. We really appreciate that. We've talked about being the model. The seeds that you sow now, you will reap later, and to never give up. And we wish you very well, and hope that it is, in fact, a wonderful summer.